Welcome back once again to the Independent Thinkers Podcast. I'm your host, Tarek Pittman. This is where we talk about local life, sports, and politics. And I would like to welcome back my good friend, Angela Hight, to talk a little bit more about the Racial Justice Act. Angela works a lot with victims, am I correct?
Mhm.
And we were talking in the previous segment. You were giving us some examples of what you actually did. What you actually do. I'm sorry. What
Yeah.
you actually did.
Yeah. So for victims, it's just been a platform. So in my prior experience, I worked for a nonprofit in Raleigh,
Hmm.
had a great time and was able to work on some policy. And so that was one of the pieces of policy that I worked on. Again, it was from the perspective of the victim's family.
Sure.
Closure. I mean,
Yeah.
this poor family, it's been 30 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if you're going to do the death penalty, do the death penalty. If you're
Yeah.
going to do life without parole, without parole.
Yeah.
There are plenty of arguments for the death
Sure.
penalty. Lyndall K will probably give them some heel turn before, he will give them
You
all.
already know his opinion.
Yeah, he knows his opinion. And there's also some against it, and
Yeah.
we have the criminal justice system, which right now in North Carolina allows the prosecution of
Sure.
of capital cases.
Can I stop for a second? I apologize. Can I back up? It's my podcast, y'all. I'm sorry.
It's a,
Can I back up? Can I know a little? Can you tell the people a little bit about you
oh,
in a nutshell? I met you at Peacemakers. I think a lot of people are looking at this and say, "It's the lady from Peacemakers."
yeah.
So a little bit brief synopsis of like who you are and all that. I like to know about people.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I am a military brat, so I don't have a home,
Oh,
as I tell people. I moved here in 2009 when I married my husband.
is he from this area?
No, he's from Indiana.
Oh, wow.
He's here for work.
Mike Pence country, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So he is here for work, and so we've been here. I spent a little bit of background on me. I spent 5 years at Civitas in Raleigh, where I did a lot of policy for criminal justice, and I ran a huge conference 1 year called the Conservative Leadership Conference. Got to work really closely with Alan West, who is like probably my
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
speaker of
Oh,
all
my
time.
man.
The
Really?
best man to work with. Like when he
Yeah.
came off the plane in the hotel, he literally looked at me and said, "Girl, let's go get some hot dogs." And he even
Wow.
took the time. There's a gentleman. I say gentleman. He's 16, I think now.
Yeah.
And he was there with me volunteering, and Alan West took him everywhere with him during that conference. Took him
my-
on stage.
Amazing.
So he was just an all-around amazing
Good.
speaker.
Good.
One of my favorite memories. But during that time, I worked to repeal legislation for the Racial Justice Act. I also worked with the district attorneys on the home leave program. So we found out that people were actually able to go home when they had a life without parole sentence on
What?
weekends. So that's another piece of policy we can talk about. And I worked very closely with the district attorneys of North Carolina on that piece of policy. Those were probably my biggest claim to fame there.
Sure.
But I've spent time. I've been serving as the vice chairman of the North Carolina Crime Victims Compensation Commission for the past 6 years.
Wow.
And I've been on that for, I think it was 4 years before. Has it been that long? Sometime in there. But I've been at Peacemakers. I have been on the board of the Pregnancy Care Center. I have two.
I like those ladies.
Yeah,
I like them.
they are an amazing organization of what they're doing and wonderfully run as well.
Yeah.
And I have two little boys who are amazing, and I have just got a rescue German Shepherd, and so he was very
Wow. How old was it's a German Shepherd? I
He's
had a
2.
German Shepherd too. They're like addictive. I mean, when you get one, I mean, you're gonna want just yeah.
that was all black for 12 years, and he
Yeah.
was my
Wow.
baby. Like before my husband, it was my baby. And then he died, and so this one we rescued. And he's been abused, so we're working through a lot of issues.
good,
But
yeah.
that's a little bit about me. You'll see me around town. I love Rocky Mount.
Good.
Want the good of Rocky Mount. I love talking to people, as you
Good.
and I both know.
Yes. What is your one impression of Rocky Mount? If someone would meet you, and you would tell them that you live in Rocky Mount, a good impression.
Yeah.
What would be your one good impression that you would tell them about Rocky Mount?
There's a lot of things, but one of the biggest things for me, I would say, as a mom, is
Yeah.
my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
During the coronavirus, probably everybody in my neighborhood, if you ever saw a woman with 2 little boys running around, that was me. And we were able to walk almost every single day.
Wow.
And I felt safe.
Yeah.
I felt secure. And just people in my neighborhood being able to say hello, they know me. I mean, it's just
Good.
the good old neighborhood system,
Good.
and you don't hear those stories about great neighborhoods anymore.
Right.
My neighbors, I laugh because 2 of them, my boys were outside playing, they were giving them treats over the fence.
Yeah.
Just so that's one of you're gonna feel the hometown.
You're right. It's like home.
Yeah.
It's like your traditional hometown, I would say. Yeah. So let's go back. Talk a little bit about. I noticed when you were, telling people a little bit about yourself. You have done a lot with victim rights.
Yes.
So where did that passion come from to help the less fortunate, I should say, people that are in need of someone to have a voice for them? Like, where did it come from? Your parents growing up, or
Just think my parents are just, all my life I've always been able to I'm very empathetic.
yeah,
And so I think I can pick that up pretty easily and say,
yeah,
all right, something's going on. What's going on here?
yeah,
And hopefully, I think one of my strengths is networking as
sure,
well. And so putting those 2 strengths together and being able to find where we can help people,
no, good,
move them forward. Sometimes you just need your hand and you need somebody to pull you across the finish line.
yeah,
And whatever that is, that's what I like to do.
yeah. I noticed that you're what I call an internal giver. Like you give a lot of yourself to others,
Thank you.
knowledge, helping hand, and that's kind of a God-given trait that some people don't have. It's a blessing. Yeah. So the Racial Justice Act, continue to tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that and the families that you've worked with and some of the things that you've seen that need to be changed in the system.
It's a very hard system. And like I said, I worked from the perspective of the victims.
Yeah.
One of the victims, there was a family in Moxville. And so the story was their daughter was in a relationship. That's an African American family.
hmm
They were in a relationship. They had a child. They were not married. And something went wrong in the relationship.
hmm
The daughter was home. The mother of the child was home with her daughter. And then her brother was there.
hmm
And the boyfriend, who was mad, came in and murdered or was attempting to murder his girlfriend,
Wow.
left the baby on the bed. The gun didn't work.
Mm.
So he took the back of the hammer, and hit the brother
hmm
with this part.
Yeah. Trigger? Not trigger, but
Mm,
I don't know.
yeah,
I'm not a
I'm
good
not.
person. My
Um,
friends are gonna kill me for that. I'm not a good person.
my husband might kill me too. But hit him with that. And so this family, meeting them, they shared their story of what happened. And Fonzie lived, who was the
Mm.
brother.
hmm
He obviously now does have some physical.
Mm. What about what about the girlfriend? She lived
She
too?
died.
She
The baby
died?
lived. I don't
Yeah.
know the update because I think
Yeah.
she's under the age of 18. So
Yeah.
um,
Sure.
Fonzie lived, and they actually, before she died, because I think she was in a coma or
Yeah.
medically, induced coma for a few weeks before she died, they put the brother and sister in the same room in
Oh.
ICU. But Fonzie was my biggest proponent at the
Yeah.
Racial Justice Act when we went to the legislature.
Good.
The murderer had applied for the Racial Justice Act, and they just want closure.
Right.
But again, he's been sentenced. He admitted guilt, and they just want closure.
Right.
Again, just let the process be over with.
How do you carry all of that? Like, you meet a lot of different people, and I'm the type of person I carry other people's weight when they have problems and things like that. Like, how do you turn it on and off? You go visit these victims' families, and then you go home to your wonderful kids, and like, how do you carry it with you sometimes?
Some days, yeah,
Yeah,
there's some days. I
it's a
remember
powerful,
we
thing.
had those
Yeah.
4 families there, or some of the families there, and we went to one of the TV stations in Raleigh and were interviewed, and they shared their stories. And I remember coming back to work, and my boss at the time, and I just looked at him, and he looked at me and said, "Go home." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay." And I literally fell asleep for several hours. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's taxing. I
Yeah.
mean, and this is not about me. This is about these families. I mean, I can't imagine
It's amazing.
what they're going through.
Yeah.
But Fonzie, funny story about him. he just wants closure. And I remember we were going up to the legislature because, when a bill goes through,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have it heard in the House and the Senate, and then the governor has to sign it.
Good
Um,
education.
yeah, you have to go through all three pieces.
Yeah.
And if he vetoes, it has to go back.
Yeah.
So we were at a time when McCrory was the governor. So
Yeah.
it went through the House, it went through the Senate, all of the steps, out of committee, so on and so forth. And the governor was signing it. And we were getting that final thing. And Fonzie looked at me. His maturity level is probably about a 13-year-old at this point. And he looked at me, he said, and his mom said, well, are you going to wear a suit? And Fonzie said, this is the only day to wear a suit. If I'm going to wear a suit,
All right.
this is the time to wear a suit. And he's like, I got to fight for my sister.
Good.
And so you see these stories, and I will continue to fight for Fonzie. You know what I mean? He's got this heart. He loves Duke basketball, all of that. And so, I think that the families, majority of the time, believe in forgiveness and will forgive, but let the healing process take place.
Yeah. So do you believe in the Racial Justice Act, or do you believe in it, but you want it to be adjusted where it is fair, or what do you think?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's a very hard question. I do believe there's racial inequalities in the criminal justice system. We've seen that.
Yeah.
I do think, we talked about the movie Just Mercy. Phenomenal movie.
I loved it. I just saw it a couple nights ago.
And even the book, if you look at his perspective of the background of the state of Alabama and the statistics, that case specifically, he should have never been charged. Never.
Yeah.
But you look at other cases, and you're like, well, the Golfin brothers, in my opinion, should have been charged.
Sure.
And they were found guilty in a court of law and by a jury of their peers.
Yeah. So it's kind of,
I don't know if we can ever legislate morality. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Great point.
There are bad people.
Yeah.
That gentleman in Minneapolis, that was a bad situation.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know if we can ever legislate morality. Yeah. And that's the hard part where I struggle with the policy point and like the politics of it. I believe in Jesus. I believe that he is all forgiving.
Yeah.
Another great book, if you've never read it, is the story of Carla Faye Tucker.
I've heard of that. I haven't read it. I'll get that.
She was a woman in Texas that was on death row, and she was, I think, a meth addict or something of that nature. Binged, and she was sentenced to death. And she became a very strong Christian.
Yeah.
And it came time for, to appeal for the pardon.
Yeah.
And I think one of the Bushes, who was the governor at the time, he said, I have to follow through with the execution because she did do the crime. Yeah. There's no evidence.
That is tough, right?
And then he said, and it went through the proper channels of the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
So you think about it, and she talks about her journey, that knowing that was God's plan for her.
Yeah.
And her testimony speaks very greatly to that.
That's incredible.
So it's a very interesting perspective. Now there are all different, Just Mercy is very different from the Carly Faye.
See, I'm more so on the Just Mercy side of it, when it comes, because being an African American male, I know the criminal justice system is not fair for us. I mean, I saw so many of my friends just go to jail for 30 years in the 90s for just selling crack.
Yeah.
And
crack for
So it's like, I can agree with it being in place, but there's some loopholes there that are unfair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. And that's the thing, if you look at any type of legislation, there's always unintended consequences.
Difficult. Yeah.
And so, you look at, the whole coronavirus thing, you're looking at it, people were talking about the unemployment system, whatever.
Yeah.
They had to put something together, and there was going to be unintended consequences. So, there's details I don't know. I can't speak to that, but that's the hard part about policy.
Yeah, sure. So where do you hope to gain, like 10, 15 years down the line? What do you want to look back on and feel as though, I've accomplished this? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all, I'm just a one-on-one person. I love people.
Yeah.
And I enjoy quality time with people.
Yeah.
It's just helping people for me. It's not, I don't have a gain for it.
Yeah.
I know God has called me to do this.
Sure.
To glorify him in that. And so it's not a gain. I just want people to know the resources that they've got, whether that's just me and a phone call,
Yeah.
whether that's the system, the Department of Public Safety having the crime victims compensation,
Yeah.
the mother that needs help with a funeral,
Sure.
whether it's peacemakers downtown doing phenomenal things for reading
Yeah.
programs,
Sure.
whether it's the pregnancy care
Yeah.
center who is changing lives through women. Um, they're just people, I think some of it is just getting the word out about what is out there and
Yeah.
that there are people who care,
Yeah.
and I have, like I said, I don't have the sympathy
Sure.
because I have not lived in your shoes.
Sure. Understood.
But
Yeah.
I definitely have the empathy.
Understood. Great
So
point. Great
yeah,
point.
so I will never be able to experience or
Yeah.
understand what
Sure.
you've been through,
Sure.
but I know that you've been hurt.
Yeah.
I know that you have been stereotyped.
Yeah.
And so, but I also think it comes with one-on-one conversations.
Sure.
Who would have thought
Sure.
you and I would have been friends?
Right. Right. I mean, an independent, more Democrat, and a Republican conservative.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Thought-
But we've had some great conversations, over the year, and I mean, I consider you a great person just in the work that you do,
You as well.
and I mean, I think that's a testament of how you were brought up and your family. And
My family's pretty special. I'll say
Yeah,
that. Even
yeah.
my husband's family is very special.
Good,
But
good.
I've got some great people.
Let me ask you now: have you ever had a victim's family to reject your help?
Sometimes, so it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
I will say, and I don't want to and I respect privacy
Sure.
of people.
Yes,
I'm one
sir.
of these people. If you work with me, there was a family
Yeah.
that we worked with, and it was hard. It was the brother that had been killed, and I was working with his brother.
Yeah.
The victim, the murder victim, was killed in a lover's quarrel. So the
Yeah.
two gentlemen were fighting over a girl,
Yeah.
and he was murdered. The gun went off, and he was murdered.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that murdered him only got second-degree murder.
Mm.
And of course, everybody grieves differently.
Right.
The brother at that point, he still was in the process, which I don't think you ever end the process.
Yeah.
Thought that this gentleman should have had the death penalty.
Yeah.
Was not what the court decided.
Yeah.
And so we got some stuff. And then I think they became uncomfortable with the process.
Yeah.
And so I had to just drop the project.
Wow.
And I have to do that out of, he has to grieve. He has to. And so if it's not a good match,
Right.
I will gladly walk away.
Yeah. Understandable.
Um,
Now, Lindale in the previous segment talked a lot about the murders that we have here in the city locally.
Yeah.
Is there any way, or is that in existence at this point, of a victims' rights organization here locally to help out some of the, I think about there's 18 mothers out there that, lost their kids
Right.
that want an individual like yourself or an organization to help them with counseling, to show them how to move around the legislative process, explain the system to them,
There are victims' assistants in the district attorney's office.
Mm.
There should be in
Yeah.
each, and I don't know the capacity to what that is.
Yeah.
For instance, I was in a car wreck last year, and the gentleman hit me and several other people, or hit several people, then hit me.
Yeah.
It was one of those. And so I got a letter from that victim's assistance person,
Oh, wow.
and saying, "Are you going to?" In other words, sue for restitution. And
Yeah.
at that point, I didn't need it. I mean, we
Yeah.
had fixed everything in our car.
Yeah.
I didn't, that was not, in my situation, was not what we needed to do. So that there are people out there within the district attorney's office.
Mm.
Now, there are other resources, like I said, at the state level. I
Mm.
don't know if there's a local support group.
That would be good because I hear a lot from people. They want justice, they want closure, but a lot of people locally, they don't know how to
Yeah.
navigate around the system, and sometimes they don't even understand the sentence that people get,
And that's what I served as some for these families is
Yeah.
because I had a relationship with some of the district attorneys, was able
Yeah.
to say, all right, give me the basic of
Yeah.
what you're saying. And so,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, let me try to, because they trusted me.
Yeah.
Let me try to have a conversation and say, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was one point I had a guy, we were at the legislature, and he got mad at some comments that a legislator was made. And I literally had to take him by the collar and pull him back down in the gallery. And I knew him well enough to do that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, but it's a hard thing because it is a costly thing too.
Yeah, sure.
Counseling's expensive.
Yeah,
The funerals, I mean, they could run $5,000 to $7,000, and that's just a basic funeral.
yeah. I
Um,
see a lot of victims, families that struggle to even afford it.
yeah,
They become creative, doing GoFundMe's on social
yes,
media and, having neighborhood cookouts and
yeah,
things in order to raise funds and no plate sales in
yeah,
order to raise funds for the burial. So I think something like that would be excellent in the area, to help continue to get the word out that, you know, um, we're here too.
yeah,
Someone gets lost in the process of the case and who did it, and that the person who's dealing with it from a victim standpoint gets kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. Yeah, so it's important work you do.
yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for coming.
No problem.
Yeah, you
Anytime.
gotta come back.
Will,
Yeah,
absolutely.
please do. I saw you on Wig, like you were like John Check, right? You was
Yeah, I was hosting the
hosting for
show.
John Check. I was surprised. I was like, oh, she's on Wig. Wow.
I
Okay.
was interviewing Dale Fulwell,
Good, good,
state
good.
treasurer, and then I've also interviewed
I met Dale before. Yeah, yeah, good guy.
and then we also have interviewed some district court judges
Oh,
on candidates for that. So I'm
good.
very excited to do that.
You're like everywhere. Angela is everywhere, y'all. This ends our show, our podcast for today, Independent Thinkers. Once again, we like to talk about local life, sports, and politics. I'm your host, Tarek Pittman. Wilbur Lodge, this baby boy. Join us again for the next episode coming soon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful and blessed day. God bless.